Do-do-do-do.
It's Halloween.
It's hello. We're live. Hello. Welcome. It's behind the scenes. AV Rant. Yup. It's episode 666 on Halloween. Hello. We're dressed up.
Oh my God.
So you're being warned. This is the behind the scenes version. That means if we have any internet troubles, then yeah, that's going to be there. So there's a completed video version that goes up with at least cleaned up audio. The video can't do anything about. The video is what it is, but at least cleaned up audio in the completed version goes up later in the week. So you are warned. This is behind the scenes. This is just the live recording session. And yeah, all right, hold on. Wait, what do I need? I'm all
I don't know. I can't see.
I need show notes, but for the intro, I'm going to take my glasses off just so I look more like the thing. But these are going to have to go back on because I'm blind.
Don't worry. I'm taking this mask off right after this podcast starts. So go.
All right. You're up.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. Rob H. This is AV Rant. This is your home theater and AV questions answered. That voice, it got me. I could
try to do Cobra Commander's voice, right? Wasn't that Leonard Nimoy who did that? I think it was Leonard Nimoy who did his voice.
I don't remember.
That's true.
If you are hearing the audio only version of this, you are missing out this week. This of all weeks, I will say it is finally time to come check out youtube.com/AVRant because this Tom is episode 666 and it has fallen right as Halloween 2019 is taking place. And we are in the spirit of Halloween. I am Skeleton Rob, and you are...
And I'm Cobra Commander on Casual Friday.
That's right. He's Cobra Commander in the sauna. And
it's very hot in this mask. I don't know how he does it.
I didn't intend to laugh at the beginning of this podcast, but that voice, wow, that got me.
So I gotta take this thing off pretty soon, but I want to make sure that we're just... I mean,
yep.
It is what it is, I guess.
I have two sets of teeth, so that's good.
My son's mask for Halloween, and I decided I was going to wear a different one, but then my other son couldn't find his zombie mask, so here I am with this thing.
That is pretty freaky, I gotta say. When you put that under a black hood and people can't see you,
can't see. It's terrifying. Oh my God, it's hot in here. All right, I'm taking it off.
Okay, all right, and glasses are going on so I can actually see our show notes. But the face makeup is staying on because there's no way to take that off now.
Oh my God, give me the towel back so I can wipe my face. It's so hot. It's nothing but my breath underneath there.
Let it never be
lights. Oh,
let it never be said we don't suffer for our love of this podcast, everyone.
I gotta believe you can see my room, right? In the reflection. You should be able to see like my whole setup.
I would tell you, but didn't have my glasses on, so I can't tell.
Oh, we were totally blind.
Oh my goodness. Geez. Well, now Tom is going to look normal for this podcast, but I will remain Skeleton Rob. So enjoy, folks. You can probably turn away from YouTube now.
I would have done something like that. I didn't have the time, but I've often, my backup costume is the crow whenever I want to do it. So just white face with the black and electrical tape around your arms and wear black clothes. So,
I mean, I guess you could say I'm like the guys from Karate Kid, but I don't have the same skeleton design as they do. So, nope, I'm just Skeleton Rob.
All right. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions, especially if they're spooky.
Yep.
Spooky questions only this week.
There is spooky news this week. Genuinely spooky, horrifying news, and I don't even think it was a Halloween prank.
It's horrifying. It's I'm sweating through my shirt. That's horrifying.
It is.
It's almost November. It's insane. Oh, jeez. All right. If you want to get your question answered on this podcast, not a podcast, a podcast.
Nope.
All you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast. You can see our video, especially the first 3 minutes of this one. Before Tom bailed out because he didn't want to turn into a desiccated husk.
Can you even see the show notes through that thing?
I can't. I couldn't see my cursor. I couldn't see anything.
We don't even know if the audio is recording right now. You should check now that you have eyes.
I did check.
Okay.
I did check. I could see that. I mean, it's not that bad. It's fine for trick-or-treating, but, not exactly great for reading under bright lights. So I had to turn my screen resolution up as high as I could just to find the record
You need
button.
that 444 chroma for sure.
Yeah. So youtube.com/AVRant Podcast. Contact us directly. Rob at AVRant.com. His Twitter is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at AVRant.com. My Twitter is at AVRant_Tom.
And even though Lee Overstreet was here as our guest co-host last week, and much big thanks to him, I've put the correct lower third back this week. So congratulations to me. I remembered. Once was enough.
If we had if this was going to be like a regular sized podcast, we could have changed the lower half and then kept the masks on the entire time and stuff like that. But I can't do that for 2 hours.
Nope.
I will be dead.
And I didn't have time to create a new lower third to be a Halloweeny thing. So we're
He asked me last
pro
night.
over here.
After I got home from climbing and I had a beer, and he texted me last night. You want to dress up for the episode? I'm like, sure. I'll throw on my son's mask.
I mean, that's all I was meaning was, did you throw out like face paint, mask? What else is it going to be? We don't have our whole bodies in the shot.
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't decide to put on the Tony the Tiger costume. That would have been, I would have killed myself.
Well, you would already be taking it off. That's what would be happening.
It would have been AV Rant striptease. Well, you can't take it off by yourself because it zips up the back all the way to your neck. So you can't. You need something to help
well
you get
designed. Excellent for going to the bathroom.
Yes. Okay. All right. Let's get going. So we're going to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is financially by going to www.avrant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, which sends you to a PayPal donation site. So we want to thank Chad and Kevin for doing that this week.
Yeah, Chad and Kevin, thank you both very much for your donations. We appreciate it.
We also want to thank our 89, so close to 90
That's what it
patrons
said.
over at patreon.com. Last episode, that was 86.
That's
so
right.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
What a jump.
And
Thank
everything
you.
in between.
Yeah, it's patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up, it's an automatic monthly donation. You say the amount, and every month it will automatically be taken from your account and given to us. So thank you to our 89 patrons over there.
All right. In the news this week from Carl, one of our listeners, Sling TV really wants you to give their live TV streaming service a try. Normally, you have to sign up for a subscription. The cheapest is $25 a month, which is spooky. It's expensive.
Be better if it had some zeros in it. Then it'd be ooh.
25 ooh a month.
Yes.
We'll put the .00 after it, and then it is.
There you go.
There you go. And of course, they offer a free trial period, but you had to create an account and enter a credit card. Back in January, they made a deal with Roku to offer certain shows completely for free. Which shows?
It was like Hell's Kitchen.
Nope.
I don't remember what else. That's the only one I remember.
Okay.
There was a handful of shows.
No account, no credit card entered. You just enter as a guest, but only on Roku devices. Now they're expanding that guest option to all Android and Android TV devices and Amazon Fire devices. And certain paid channels can now be accessed a la carte without having to sign up for a subscription package. So they're apparently spiraling the financial drain and are doing whatever they can to claw their way out of it.
That's not typically a good sign when you start doing that. But hey, for however long they last, why not take advantage? If you've got an Android phone or an Android TV device or an Amazon Fire device or a Roku device, go get yourself
Xbox
some
count?
free content. Nope, wouldn't count.
Nope. Okay.
Nope, that's none of those things. You got an Android
Netflix
phone.
has begun beta testing a new option on their Android phone app that allows you to adjust the playback speed anywhere from 50 to 150%. We've already had directors complaining about it.
Yeah.
There was not even veiled threats about it. I was reading about it. It's like, don't make me take you down. I'm like, yeah, you're taking down Netflix because you made a couple of movies. Shut up.
I have to say, though, I wouldn't mind this. I really wouldn't mind it. There is so much TV, and I mean, there is some content where I'm like, yeah, I just kind of want to get through this story. Like, you know what? All the CW shows, most of which are on Netflix.
Yes.
I'm like, yep, crank it up. Let's just, I would like to keep up on them. I would like to keep abreast of the plot, but at the same time, this can speed up. I wouldn't mind. Get through the 44 minutes in about 28. That'd be just fine.
That's right. Somebody's walking out of a room again on The Flash. Oop, there's somebody following them. Okay, now they're going to talk in the hallway. Yeah, I might have seen this scene a couple of times before. I don't mind The Flash. I don't mind Supergirl. I used to be okay with Arrow.
Oh, it's in its final season now, so.
Yeah, what's the other one?
Legends of Tomorrow.
I heard the first 2 seasons of that were kind of garbo.
Well, the
but then
first season was garbo, and then it got pretty. I mean, they just went. They're like, you know what? Let's just go nuts, and it got pretty fun after the first season.
Okay, and I like Brandon Routh because I think that guy got totally shafted by being Superman. I mean, I really do. I think that guy is not nearly. I don't. I mean, I think he just got so pigeonholed by that role that I feel like anytime he does something, I want to support him.
Yep.
Just like a pity support or whatever.
Aww.
I would feel the same. I mean, I don't mean that. I think he's a fine actor. I guess. I mean, he's never disappointed me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I loved him in what's his name? Scott Pilgrim.
Oh yes, Scott Pilgrim. He was in Chuck for a while too, wasn't he?
He was in Chuck for a while. That's right. I did watch those seasons, I think, or some of those. I don't know. Chuck bothered me. Just whatever.
In any case, to some people's surprise, I'm not against this. I'm like, even though I very much am in favor of director's intent when it comes to adjusting the calibration of your TV and having audio systems that are nicely tuned so that you hear all the sounds at appropriate levels, for some things, I would go ahead and play them back faster if possible.
Yeah, I mean, and there's something to be said about slowing it down sometimes, especially if you're doing something subtitled. And sometimes those subtitles go by pretty freaking fast, especially if you want to look at the screen and see what's happening.
All right, spooky news time. Genuinely scary.
Blue Jeans Cable announced their partnership with Belden cable engineer Galen Garius. I don't know, whatever. He's got a spooky last name. It translates to he who is part wolf, to launch iconoclast cables, their entry into the high-end audiophile cable market, because they're like, there's low-hanging fruit and we're gonna pick it. Let me see. They claim the RCA, XLR, and speaker wire designs are based on real engineering research, but manufacturing-wise, they are complicated and somewhat impractical for mass production, so they are expensive. For example, a 6-foot terminated speaker wire is $610 spooky dollars.
Or just one that would connect one speaker to one amplifier.
That's 4 feet away because it bends.
Especially with these, they are not flexible.
$840 for the oxygen-free copper, or $1,080 for silver-plated copper, all of which they flat out say makes zero difference, but offer for some reason anyway. The reason is money.
Yup, because some people will pay it because it's there.
Yeah, the cable that they're buying. So there's a company that, and I think they sell on the line anymore, but they used to sell online, Westlake Electronics, which is out of like Portland or something like that, somewhere in the upper, West Coast. I went to their website one time and I was ordering, this was a long time ago before I even worked for Audioholics, and I was ordering cable because I found out about them. They were cheap. I was ordering speaker cable. I'm like, there's this one right here. I actually called them. Talked to somebody online. So this one right here, this white cable. He goes, oh no, we don't sell white cable. I'm like, well, there's on your website, it says white cable and it says Blue Jeans on it. What does that mean? He goes, oh, hold on a second. Came off the website in like 5 minutes. I'm like, so if you want to know, I don't know if they still do, but where they used to get their speaker wire from, it was from Westlake Electronics, which is, I think I was paying like 70 cents a foot or 50 cents a foot or 40 cents a foot or something. It was something really cheap. And Blue Jeans is only charging you like $1.50 or something. I mean, it's not, at that time, it wasn't that much of a markup, but it was still hilarious. So anyways, a 6-foot XLR cable goes from anywhere from $392 and to $1,175, depending on your choice of copper. Again, they say that doesn't affect the performance, but if you like silver, then you're in like Flint. And a 6-foot RCA cable will run you between $335 and $1,045. They've posted tremendously long white papers to explain these designs, and you can return the cables within 30 days for any reason. No RMA required, just ship them back. You're dumb enough to order them, you could be dumb enough to pay for the return and shipping.
Pretty much. This disappoints me quite greatly.
You know what? I don't care.
Yeah?
I don't care. They're being upfront. They're like, listen, these are handmade cables. You want them to be handmade? They're handmade. You don't want them to be made in China? They're not. Well, I mean, they're probably made in China, but they're assembled here.
They are
And
definitely assembled in
and
Seattle.
you want all the stuff, you can have all the stuff. We'll gold plate
Well,
that
I
bad
mean,
boy for you.
the part that was, I mean, there's there's the rather hilariously hypocritical bit where right on Blue Jean's descriptions of Iconoclast cables, not on the Iconoclast cables website itself, but on Blue Jean's own page where they're describing it, they're like, oh, high-end cable manufacturers like to wax poetic about their cables and why they make a difference to the sound and all that, but we believe in true engineering and here's the measurements and all that. But then they post like a 95-page long explanation about why you should pay $1,000 for a speaker wire. So if that isn't waxing poetic in a more technically minded way, okay, I'll grant you that. But at the same time, it's the same marketing technique of if we just talk your ear off long enough.
Kill them with words, right? If you say enough
yeah.
things, it's got to be worth it. Somebody wrote 95 pages about this thing. Surely it's worth $1,000.
But I don't want to go into this too deeply because we're only in the news section, but I wanted to mention something. Yes, there are numbers listed there. I will go ahead and take them at face value. Okay, somebody measured that stuff or calculated it. Okay, I won't dispute those, even though I question the whole sound traveling down a wire much more slowly at 20 hertz claim. But I mean, that is a real thing, right? As frequencies go lower, the propagation speed of the electromagnetic field that is carrying the signal, that does slow down, and they kind of extrapolated that to a degree that I don't think is really truthful. But regardless, even if we took their figures at the worst case scenario, all right, the worst case scenario they list of 20 hertz somehow propagating down the wire 20 times slower than a 20 kilohertz sound, all right, fine, I'll take you at your word. That is what they're claiming. Even if that were the case, in the worst case scenario, you are playing a 20 hertz sound at exactly the same time as a 20 kilohertz sound, and their claim is that because of this timing difference in the velocity of the propagation, that could throw off the phase relationships, which could eventually become audible. Even if we are to believe all of that, it would only happen if you were using a cable that is, with their numbers, longer than 41 feet. That is, like, mathematically, that is what it would take. And
41 feet, 41 divided by 6 times 1,000.
Right.
Seems like a lot.
So,
it's like $6,000, $7,000.
Could you be using a speaker wire longer than 40 feet? Sure. But a lot of speaker wires are shorter than 40 feet. And so this was in their comparison between what they're selling versus just 10 gauge zip cord. Right, which Belden also sells. So, okay, that's the claim there. Take that for what, and that's their own numbers. Now, they don't, of course, not mention that. I also think the entire sort of approach that they described this Galen Garius that he took seems like quite faulty scientific method, because he basically said, I have heard a difference in high-end cables, and I can't explain it.
I can.
But because I heard it, I believe that there must be a physical reason within the cable for why I was able to hear it. And if I measure carefully enough, I find these timing differences. And that must be it. Which I'm like, that's not good scientific reasoning to say that's the approach. But even more so, at the end of all of it, there's nothing new under the sun, because when you come to, okay, even if we take all of that, it is these timing differences, and we believe the numbers that have been measured or calculated, blah, 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 blah. We put all that together. Still, the solution was to lower the impedance of the wire. That was the solution. Because that is the only solution that ever comes up in speaker wire, is to lower the impedance of the wire. Right. And then, yes, it's true. If all you do is keep making the wire thicker and thicker and thicker, not only does it become unwieldy, but you do get into these weird effects where the signal is no longer going down the center of the conductor and it is going around the edges. There is still skin effect. Even at low frequencies, if you get the wire thick enough, it does still exist. So, okay, we put all that aside.
1 gauge wire this big, you send a huge current down it. Yeah, that's
so he's like, okay, we're going to use the optimal thickness of wire so that we aren't getting into even potential skin effect things and like that. But then once you do that, you start raising the inductance. So to counter the inductance, we're going to braid the wire. That raises the capacitance. And yes, you ended up with cables that had lower than normal inductance, like versus 10 gauge zip cord, slightly higher capacitance, and what do you know? Exactly double. The inductance went down by half, so the capacitance went up by 2. That is what always happens. And it's like, yeah, these cables, they're fine. Like, you look at the numbers, and there is no reason why these cables would be any type of problem. And having a little bit lower inductance and a little bit higher capacitance tends to be easier for a low impedance speaker to deal with. So if you're audiophile speakers that dip down to 2 ohms or something, this will probably work really nicely, right? Won't ever curtail your high frequency. So all of it is fine. But at the same time, it's still, I can't call it BS. It's not BS. It's truthful. It's just unnecessary.
Well, I mean, we did, Audioholics did that whole handmade cable, braided versus solid versus all this other stuff. And the end result was technically, measurably braided cable, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what all the results were, slightly better, but and they didn't, there's nothing that you would need to do for this is way more overkill. It's more like a thought experiment than it is.
It pretty much is. Like, how can we do this? And like I say, yes, you found these timing differences. Yeah, they do exist. I mean, everything tells us that they should, and it can be measured. But to then make the extrapolation of, well, I heard the differences, and this is the only difference I could find and measure, so that must be the explanation. It seems a little faulty to me.
Well, okay, so that's an exclusionary tactic to exclude all the other manufacturers who say the real problem is the inductance. The real problem is this. The real problem is that. He's saying, oh, I actually measured, and this is the difference I found.
Yeah.
So therefore, that's the only difference it could possibly be. Everybody else is full of crap. Well, I mean, and then to say, and none of our cables actually make a difference in the sound, but you can pay more if you want to.
Pretty much.
I mean, I honestly don't care. I understand your.
Well, the reason I really dislike this is it's just going to open up all the truly BS claims yet again, right? All the ones that are truly BS, they're going to be like, look at this guy's wipe, because they know nobody's going to read and comprehend the 95 pages that he wrote about this. They're just going to be like, look, this engineer who used to be a skeptic is saying there really is a difference in cables. It's like, oh, here we go again.
The middle 75 of that pages is just that ipsum, lopsum, whatever stuff, right? It's the 10 beginning and 10 end that are actually words. The middle of it's just gibberish. They didn't even bother saying anything.
But anyway, people, don't go spending $1,000 on 6 feet of speaker wire. Please, I mean, if you want the best you can get some 10-gauge zip cord. Off you go.
You probably just need 12, but that's
yes, absolutely. Well, we've always been saying up to 50 feet, 12 gauge will allow 100% to you. Maybe over 50 feet, maybe you could need 10. Now it's saying 41. Okay, a little bit more conservative. I can live with that.
James, this is a comment from one of our listeners. Just wanted to express his advocacy for using fiber optic HDMI cables, even at distances less than 50 feet. In his case, he's using a 25-foot and 35-foot lengths, and he just went for ones that were available on Amazon UK. He found them to be thinner, more flexible, thus easier to pull through the conduit he has installed, and they've worked perfectly where passive copper HDMI cables have failed. So they are more expensive, but fiber optic is certainly easier to pull.
Yes.
Or a lot of stuff. And
they are easier to find today than they were, say, 5 years ago. So that helps.
And in theory, since unless they have a specialized connector at the end, if they come out with a new solution that ups the bandwidth, you could theoretically just take the 2 converters on either side and switch those out.
That's some tricky termination at those types of small sizes. I'm not sure about that, but theoretically.
All right, let's get some questions in here. I can't believe there's anything left from last week after you guys went so long.
Well, we did a long review of Gemini Man, so that took
how was
time.
It? Did you guys both watch it?
I watched it in the high frame rate, and Lee was interested, so we discussed.
Oh, I didn't listen to it. Chris, so the ongoing Xbox One audio saga, settings saga. Okay, so Chris, I went back and checked my settings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what I had it set on. So I changed it to, now I can't remember what I changed it to.
Okay.
But I think it's bitstream, but they seem to have fixed the surrounds come out the surround backs.
Oh, okay.
That doesn't seem to be happening anymore. The surrounds are coming out of the surrounds, but you don't get anything out of the surround backs.
Oh, okay.
So that seems to be fixed as far as I could tell. So now I think I'm putting out
7.1. Uncompressed PCM?
Yeah, and I believe I'm getting. Geez, I wish I should. If I had known this question was first, I would have checked. But I believe I'm getting no sound on the surround backs, but it is matrixing up to the overheads.
Okay.
I believe that's what I told it to do. It could be I told it to do bitstream, and it's actually bitstreaming out.
Yeah.
Pretty well, but we'll see. So, anyways, Chris has been dealing with the issue, with this issue too, since there's no perfect option where he can just set it and forget it. He listened with interest when we suggested just setting it to output 2.0 stereo, and then to rely on the upmixing from your AV receiver to put sounds in all your speakers, no matter what the original source was. When he tried that, he found it severely lacking in bass. I almost said bass for some reason. I don't know.
Well,
I guess
they
I
are
want to go
spelled
fishing.
the same.
It's a bug on my screen.
Always.
A spooky bug.
Could be. Yes. Not anymore. He's dead.
If he uses 5.1 on compressed PCM or really any of the other audio options, he can feel the bass shaking his eyeballs. That's loud. Mm-hmm. But with it set to 2.0, there's hardly anything there. So if we notice that as well, no. Or is there some reason or something that could be changed to explain what he experienced?
There are multiple things that could be the cause of this.
Yeah, and I would blame most of them on the Xbox. But
I don't know. In this case, I would blame most of it on the AV receiver, because if you just set the Xbox to output 2.0, it's pretty hard for the Xbox itself to have really messed anything up at that.
Do we remember what kind of receiver he has?
No, that's the thing.
Because I know, like on my Denon, there's specific settings for stereo that are separate
from surround sound. Yeah.
So your bass management might be completely different. On it might actually have you defaulted to large, no subs.
That is exactly it, or even large with subs. Because if the front, left, right speakers are set to large, then the incoming signal is just 2.0. So there is no dedicated low-frequency effects channel that will be sent to the subwoofer output and nothing but with the subwoofer set to on. But with the front, left, right speaker set to large, all of the sound is being sent to your front, left, and right speakers, and none of it is being bass managed into your subwoofer output. So that is the first and most obvious thing to check, is either are your front, left, right speakers just set to large all the time, or are you like Tom and I, who have Denon and AVRant receivers where there are separate settings for stereo versus surround sound, and it's very possible that in the stereo only settings it has set your speakers to large. So that is easy to check, hopefully. Now there is another one, which is, are you, Chris, by any chance using an Onkyo brand receiver? And I don't think this has been the case for the past 2 years. In the past 2 years that I've checked, they've done the bass management properly, but prior to that, they had a weird thing, which was when a signal came in 2.0, it didn't bass manage it properly if you had set all of your speakers to small, set your subwoofer to on, but then set the subwoofer output to LFE only. Or like, you know how there's LFE versus LFE plus mains?
Yeah.
Now, when it's done correctly, you should only ever have to have that set to LFE for the subwoofer output. But I know from having gone through this rigmarole myself, that on some of the older Onkyo receivers, if you set it to just LFE with a stereo signal, it didn't bass management. It left it as though it were full range, even into speakers set to small. And the fix for that was to set the subwoofer output to LFE plus mains. Even with small front speakers, if you set it to LFE plus mains, now it would say, okay, the bass will always be sent to both things. So even with a 2.0 stereo signal, the bass from full range left-right channels got sent to the subwoofer.
How does that even happen in this day and age?
I know.
How do you mess up a receiver that bad? Bass management is something we've been doing for a long time. I just can't understand.
Well, look at all the weird things that like the non-large consumer brands do with bass management still today. There is some wacky stuff being done out there.
I don't understand.
So those are my two prevailing theories, Chris, that either they are just set to large, which would explain it, or your front, left, right speakers, that is, or you're using an Onkyo receiver, and try setting the subwoofer output to LFE plus mains, and I bet that will fix this issue.
I need to go back and add a listener of the week.
Okay.
I just remembered. Vincent.
Yes.
Vincent asked me a question.
Okay.
And specifically about computer speakers. And then when I answered it promptly, he sent me a gift card.
Oh, very nice.
For Amazon.
Well, thank you, Vincent.
So, Thank you, Vincent. Sorry about that. Right that at the top.
I shall.
Right at the
Here
top.
it goes.
All right. Yeah, your biggest culprit right here, Chris, is probably your AV receiver, and it's probably I want to blame the Xbox for everything. I honestly
I don't think this one is, though. I really don't.
But it would be hard for. Yeah, I agree. I would have a hard time believing that would be the case. So I think you've probably got some sort of Den or Marantz receiver that does different bass management for 2.0 than it does for the other one. If it is the Onkyo, then this is a good time to upgrade and not go LFE.
It's not
plus
that hard
mains.
to switch it to LFE plus mains. So I mean, if that fixes your issue, that's a pretty easy setting switch.
Is it Aras?
I think it's Aras. Aras, I believe it's Aras.
Aras? All right, Aras. At the moment, Aras is using a 7.1.4 setup with clip speakers all around for the floor level and KEF in-ceiling speakers. And when he says floor level, I mean he's got towers behind him.
And these are like clip shorn.
Old school.
They're not like the skinny reference series clips. These are the clip shorn huge boxes.
Yeah, they're big.
Yeah.
So he's got these big boxes, and it looks like that. Is that a woofer in the back of those tower
It
speakers?
sure looks.
Or
it's probably a passive radiator.
That's what I would guess too, but it's such a dark hole in the center there. I want to say it's like the world's largest port.
No, I'm pretty sure that's covered. I'm pretty sure that is a big old cone passive radiator, I believe. Yes.
Yeah.
He's got them up front and as his, hilariously, surround backs. Those are some efficient, loud surround backs, sir.
Yeah. So, yeah. He tends to move in the next year or two, and a priority of his will be a comparable room for home theater, comparable to this.
Yeah.
Okay. So this room looks like long and thin.
Yeah.
And he's got room treatments frickin' everywhere, which is awesome,
which is great,
including on the ceiling.
But I mean, he has a tile floor with a rug over it, but still, a rug isn't going to be as absorptive as full carpet with a pad under it. So having the extra absorption on his ceiling and side walls is a darn good idea.
For some reason, the bottom third of his wall is open to the joists.
I bet he was doing some rewiring or something when he took this picture. This isn't necessarily a picture from today.
So anyways, he has it in mind that he would like to replace all his clip speakers with KEF. Now, normally, I would say, why? Because if you like clips, why would you want... KEF isn't exactly a comparable sound. But then he says he's willing to consider other brands, but for one thing, he really prefers the way the KEF speakers look. Their aesthetics just appeal to him, and he has the chance to audition some KEF reference and R-series speakers in the store, and he was completely blown away by the KEF reference series demos, so we'd love to have those as front three. So that right there is all I need to hear in order to make sure.
I mean, he had clip speakers from years ago, and look, they were darn good speakers, obviously been very easy to drive this whole time, and, hasn't had a chance or desire to upgrade until now, but done some demoing, loves the way the KEF speakers look, loves the way they sound, so that sounds good to me.
So he says the KEF R series were also excellent. He loved their looks, so he'd like the rest of his system to be those. But he'd be willing to use KEF R series up front too if he just can't afford the reference series. With all that said, he'd like to hear if we agree with his upgrade plan because he intends to upgrade a bit at a time. And in particular, he'll be looking out for used or store clearance deals. So he wants to be able to pounce whenever a deal comes along. Do we agree with his choice of KEF speakers, or should he be looking elsewhere before he starts buying whatever good deal comes along? Man, it would be, I think, not just like a bad idea, but just morally wrong for us to tell you to do anything other than buy the speakers that you listened to and you liked. I would have to be the kind of person that would try to actively sell old people retired people the reverse mortgage thing.
Right.
That's how dishonest I would have to be in order to try to push you towards another brand.
Where something like that might come into play is someone who's really new to audio, and the first thing they heard, like let's say the first thing they heard was some Bose Cubes, and they're like, these sounded amazing in the store. Should I get them or should I consider something else? If it's that scenario, I'd be like, you should at least go hear some other things.
Well, I would say that even if they heard KEF. I went to the store, I heard KEF. They just blew me away. Should I get them? Well, my response would be KEF is a great speaker.
Yeah.
We wholly recommend them. If this is the only thing you heard, you need to keep listening.
Sure.
But this guy is not in the same boat.
But to me, that's a different scenario, because if someone came to me and said, I heard some KEF R series or some KEF reference series speakers, and I absolutely fell in love with them, and I love the way they look, and I'm thinking of getting them, is that a good idea? Like, yeah, Yeah, it is. I just like that's the end of the story to me because I have no reason, unlike Bose Cubes, I have no reason to even try and make someone move away from that choice because I think they're excellent speakers. And if you like everything about them, I've got zero reason to steer you away.
So the one thing that stood out to him during this demos was the excellent imaging of the KEF speakers. But is that really a factor in an Atmos home theater setup, or is it mostly just a stereo music thing? Well, no, imaging is pretty much important all the way around. I mean, you think about the way that Atmos works is it says here in this room is where the sound is supposed to be coming from. If you don't have a speaker right there, I'm going to use what speakers I know you have in order to make it sound like it's coming from there. That is by definition imaging.
Yep.
So even if it's imaging above your head or behind you or, you know, off to your right or left, that's still imaging. So yes, imaging is important.
Yeah. And the coaxial design of the speakers that KEF uses is precisely so that it has very even dispersion in all directions, up, down, left, right, all directions, very even dispersion across the whole frequency range. And that really helps contribute to that excellent imaging.
So once he is in his new place in a year or two and he's completed the majority of his speaker upgrades, he is thinking he would like to expand beyond 7.2.4 to something like 9.2.6 or maybe even more. Do we expect any receiver brands to be offering a model that can do 9.2.6 or more for around $3,000 or less in 2 years or so? So what's the big Denon that can do a bunch of stuff?
The
How many can it do?
X8500H right now that can do 13 speakers, not 15. So it could do 9.2.4 or 7.2.6, but it can't do 9.2.6, and it certainly can't do more than that.
So in 2 years, you can definitely get that one at Accessories for Less for under $3,000.
You can get it right now for that price.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do 9.2.6. Now, for $3,000 right now, Emotiva does have their new XMC2 processor, though. That's a processor, no amplifiers built in. So obviously once you add 15 amplifiers, I mean, maybe you have some external amplification already, I don't know.
Well, he could use his current receiver to do
you could use your current receiver to be like 7 of those amps, but chances are you're going to have to get some more external amplifications. So that would put the price over $3,000. But that is an option that today costs $3,000 and can process 9.2.6. Although, being an Emotiva processor, I don't know if it will ever be completely bug-free or if Dirac will ever arrive because they promised it would, but of course it isn't here yet, and who knows when it will be. So all of that is a little bit questionable. There are other processors that can do this.
If you want to buy Emotiva amps, I'm 100% behind that. I can't until they come out with a processor that is fully functional out of the box.
I mean, this new platform that they're on with their RMC1 and RMC1L and XMC2 that all share the same basic platform, it's looking pretty good, but until the features that they promised are actually here, because Emotiva has a horrible track record of actually delivering the things they promised on. The XMC1 never got Atmos. Never. They promised it would. It never came. They're like traded in for an XMC2 now, and people are like, that's not what you promised us, like 6 years ago at this point. So in any case, whatever. Those are processors. Receivers, God, is anybody going to put 15 amplifiers in a receiver? Is anybody going to do that?
I don't know about 15. You'd have to,
Denon put 13, so what's 2 more? But
yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
What happens?
Product, it could happen.
What happens if, say,
in 2 years though?
Yeah, what happens if, say, the X? So we just got the X3600, which brought 9 amplifiers and processing of 11 speakers down to the 3000 series. So what if the X4700 in the future gets 11 amplifiers built in, and the 6700 gets 11 amps built in, but can process 13 speakers, say, or something like that. Maybe the X8700H in a couple of years does like 13 amplifiers built in and can process 15 speakers. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I could see Denon potentially doing something like that, to keep moving things.
It would have to be. It'd have to be a flagship product.
Yes,
Denon only comes out with those every couple of years, and sometimes it takes longer than that. So I don't necessarily think you'll see it in 2 years. I think you could see it in 3 or 4.
Right. I mean, I certainly wouldn't.
There's a lot that
bank
can happen between
on
now
it.
and
I wouldn't
then.
plan on that being a thing for sure, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, and there will for sure be processor options for 9.2.6. That is unquestionable. They already exist today.
Yeah. Yeah. So he knows that some center speaker models have 4 woofers, while others only have 2. Does that make a big noticeable difference? Just looking at the number of woofers that are in something and saying, how come or whatever, or how does that make it better? It doesn't necessarily make it better. I know it's hard to kind of wrap our heads around that and just say, well, it's a bigger speaker, it's got more woofers. Clearly, it's better in some way. Or think of it as more of a design choice. And depending on your room, you may or may not need that design, or depending on the design. There are many speakers out there that have multiple woofers in them, only a fraction of which are actually playing sound, and the other are all just passive radiators that are there just to make you look at it and say, wow, it's got a lot of woofers in it. It doesn't really.
I mean, what you're coming back to is how much air can this thing displace? Right. Part of that is sheer surface area. So if you have, how many of these drivers at what size? That's a question, because, 2 larger drivers could have the same surface area as 4 smaller drivers. That's a surface area question. But then there's also how far back and forth do those drivers move? Because when we're talking about displacing air, if you have 4 small drivers and none of them move back and forth very much, that won't move as much air as 2 of the same size drivers that move back and forth a lot more. So it's all about displacement of air. I mean, I can see in a center channel speaker using more smaller drivers so that the height of the speaker doesn't have to be increased to accommodate a larger diameter driver. That makes sense.
But then you now have to deal with greater width. And you have to.
That's right.
So louder. Generally speaking, the more drivers you see in something, you can kind of assume it's going to play louder than something that has fewer drivers, but that's not true.
Given them being the same size and the same excursion, that would be true. Yeah.
That would be true.
It's a lot of ifs.
But you can't know that. You can't know that. And like I said, I've seen many speakers where it's got, a tweeter, a woofer, and another woofer in there, and you're like, okay, well, that's better than just a tweeter and a woofer, right? I'm like, no, it's a tweeter, woofer, and that second woofer is a passive radiator. Right. I mean, it doesn't have a voice coil behind it, doesn't have a magnet. It's just
it could have been diaphragm. A port. It could have been a hole.
So the other one's got a port in the back, and this one's got a passive radiator in front. What's the difference? Well, functionally, not a lot. So it's hard to look at it and say. You really want to look at measurements. You really want to take into account how far away you're sitting from your speaker. You really want to, first of all, you're looking at reference in our series from Cap. Yeah. Don't worry about the number of drivers.
You will be fine. Yeah.
You will be fine. That's right. So you don't have to worry about it. But if that's just like a general question, then it's very hard to look at just look at a speaker and say, oh, I can tell you something about that speaker because of the way it looks.
Right. But like one example would be like if you're looking at Paradigm's lineup or Klipsch's lineup or Kef's lineup, and you see they have 2 or 3 center speaker models that all use the same tweeter and the same size woofers, but they increase the number of woofers as the model goes up. If you look at the particularly the power handling spec usually goes up commensurate with the number of drivers in that type of scenario, and the efficiency usually goes up as well. Sometimes the bass response extends deeper. So it's those types of things. Again, it's just because you have more surface area to play with.
That's right. And they're just adding more of the exact same driver to it. So you know that. But you couldn't look at that Klipsch and say, this one has 4 woofers, and then look at a different speaker. This one has, 6. So this one must play louder.
Right.
Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Yeah. Mark says we've mentioned Panasonic's Ultra HD Blu-ray players and their HDR optimizer in particular, and how beneficial it can be for projectors. But what if you were using an SDR 1080p projector? Would a Panasonic UB420 offer any benefits in that scenario? So when you're playing an Ultra HD disc and you're basically down converting it to SDR, that's where the benefit comes in for a standard high definition projector, a regular 1080p projector.
Yeah, the HDR to SDR down conversion.
That's where that comes in. That becomes beneficial because it can look really weird.
Yes,
if it's
it
not done right.
certainly can. Yeah, and that doesn't have anything to do with Panasonic's HDR optimizer.
No.
That is not what that. The HDR optimizer is about tone mapping the HDR for an HDR display. It has nothing to do with HDR to SDR conversion. But that aside, the UB420 is an affordable player at $220 right now. It's so what, the Sony X700 is $200, so I guess that's a slight bit cheaper, but the Sony X800M2 is $250, so the Panasonic UB420 is right in there with the other two good players that I would recommend in this scenario. And the UB420 does have very good HDR to SDR conversion. So I would say it's a very good choice because it's a reasonable choice as far as price goes. It is good at converting HDR to SDR, and then if and when you do upgrade to a 4K HDR display, it has the HDR optimizer that will be really beneficial. So is it like benefiting you more than another $200-ish player like one of the Sonys? No. The Sony X700 or the X800M2 can also convert HDR to SDR very nicely. So it's not that the Panasonic has an advantage, but in the future, if you upgrade to a 4K HDR display, then it does have an advantage. So given that it doesn't cost more, why not?
Right. Raf recently upgraded his front LCR, its left, center, and right speakers and surround speakers to MK Sound S150 speakers. Now he'd like to add in-ceiling speakers for Atmos. MK Sound offers their in-ceiling speakers, but they're quite expensive. $750 each plus $220 each for a back can, which is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Is it necessary to get them in order to have the best matching sound quality, or could he go with a cheaper brand of in-ceiling speakers? If so, what should he get? Really, it doesn't. I mean, I would not pay over $1,000.
No, you can definitely go less
speakers.
Expensive for your in-ceiling Atmos speakers, for sure.
Atmos speakers they really were, the idea of Atmos was really designed with, in my mind, was designed with the idea that you're going to use standard off-the-shelf in-ceiling speakers that are used for whole house audio, which are meant to have very wide dispersion. And also not necessarily break the bank when it because you're going to be using what's already in your ceiling.
Kinda,
yeah. You're not. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. So the idea of going out and spending hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars on in-ceiling speakers for Atmos, I think doesn't make a lot of sense. I think you can go with, quite literally, you can look at a speaker and say, I want to spend this much. Where are my options? And then find the one that's aesthetically the most pleasing for you and not worry about it.
So, I mean, some people might bulk at an in-ceiling speaker costing even $100 each or $150 each or something like that. I don't think Raf is going to fall into that category.
No.
If he was willing to buy MK...
If he's considering...
Yeah, if he's even considering...
almost $1,000 each.
And so given that, I'm going to point you first... My first choice for you would be Aperion. Aperion's in-ceiling speakers are $150 each, certainly less expensive than $750 each, obviously.
Yeah, for less than one of those, you can get 4 of these.
Right.
So, and that doesn't include the back.
What I like there is that you're not getting a wildly different set of materials and efficiencies. You're getting pretty darn close to the same efficiency, and it's still a soft dome tweeter and a similar type of woofer material and that. So, if you're looking at any of that stuff and worrying about, I mean, we say over and over again, it really doesn't matter what material is being used. If designed properly, you're looking at very similar frequency response. But if any of that is seeping into your mind, given that we like these speakers overall, the price is reasonable at $150 each, and it's got similar efficiency and materials, it's makes someone feel very comfortable about that purchase, I would think. Along the same lines, ELAC does have their new line of in-ceiling speakers. I think they're a tad overpriced at $200 each, but that's not bad and certainly less than $750. So those are two really good options. Neither of those have dedicated back cans that either Aperion or ELAC sells themselves. They basically need 1 cubic foot of space for any enclosure, which is quite easy to either purchase a generic back can that would be like a fire prevention back can that might be required by code if these are going into an attic space, or you can construct a box if you want to do that. That's 1 cubic foot in interior volume, or if you were considering $220 for MK Sounds back cans, you might be willing to pay. Again, I think it's a little overpriced, but $100 each is what the Dynamat retrofit. They're not. You can't really call them back cans because they're that Dynamat material, like what you line the bed of a truck with foam inside. But they can actually be retrofit. You make the hole for where your speaker's going to go, and then you can actually roll these up, insert them in the hole, and then they expand back out in there, and then you put the foam in, and they act as a nice little enclosure there. So they're a kind of cool design for that if you don't want to make big holes to put back cans up there.
So $250 each if you go with the Aperion and these back cans.
That's right.
That's not so bad. Mm-hmm. And to whoever is going to complain that we don't ever let people spend money on this show because we're always recommending cheap stuff. The dude with the reference speakers, those aren't cheap.
No, they are not.
Those aren't cheap. We didn't say go buy something cheaper. They also
are very nice.
Yeah. And sometimes you get what you pay for, but and with the M&K you might be getting what you pay for, but it's like saying, "Oh, I'm going to get this fantastic, leather jacket thingy that's, made from, Wagyu cows or something, and it's the most supple leather in the world, and I live in Florida. I'm going to tell you not to buy the freaking jacket because you're never going to wear it. I wear a jacket maybe 3 times a year in here. I've worn a jacket more often on a plane than I have in the state. So yeah, M&K speakers in your ceiling don't make any sense. Now, if you were going to take those and put them, as your left-right surrounds or whatever, well, then we've got something to talk about. But
for
not
Atmos,
just because.
I mean, honestly,
Atmos,
the Aperions are probably overkill, but they're very, very nice. And the chances of you being disappointed in their match with your MKs is nil. So I feel very comfortable recommending them.
Steve on Twitter, he says an AV question, not home theater. We do promise to answer those as well.
We do promise to answer home theater and AV questions.
That's right. Steve has a meeting room in his workplace. He's in Canada. And they use a projector, and it would be more convenient if they didn't have a long HDMI DVI cable. Is there a simple wireless HDMI solution that we could recommend? Well, we haven't looked at these in a long time.
No.
And I remember when they first came out, and everybody's like, they'll never do 1080p over the air. And they're like, look, we're doing it. Like, shut
We
up.
don't have a good 4K HDR solution for wireless yet, though. But that is not the scenario he described. At least I don't think so. Most presentation projectors in a meeting room are probably not 4K HDR. They might not even be 1080p.
Might not even be 1080p. They might be some weird, 768 resolution or something like that. So what you got?
All right. So there are 2 separate sort of, I guess you could call them wireless standards that are in use. One uses the 5.8 gigahertz band to do this transmission, which means it actually is doing some video compression and video decompression on the other end. But at 5.8 gigahertz, it is able to penetrate some walls. So that's what's going on there. Then there is the other standard that uses the 60 gigahertz spectrum, which has to be line of sight. That will not penetrate any walls whatsoever. So given that this is all happening in a meeting room, I bet the 60 gigahertz line of sight one will be okay. It didn't sound like they're sending these through walls. That is the less expensive one. Monoprice has their Blackbird series, which you can get in Canada through Prime Cables. So it's primecables.ca. They resell Monoprice products in Canada. $210, which is a little bit bad on the exchange rate, but it's still not too bad. That is the 60 gigahertz solution. It is one HDMI input and sending it to one display. If you're like, this does need to go through a wall or a cabinet or something like that, the Wire Cutter did a bunch of testing on this. They recommend IO Gears. This is a wonderful name, but is the GW3D HD. That's the name of the unit.
3D?
It does do 3D. It does support 3D.
Oh, there you go.
That uses the 5.8 gigahertz version. This has 2 HDMI inputs, so you can connect 2 sources, and it also does an HDMI pass-through to a regular display plus the wireless to a second display. So if you do have a flat panel and a projector and you still want to connect both displays to possibly 2 sources, this can do that for $260 Canadian. It's available at Amazon. So those are 2 solutions that should get this done for you.
Christian is using a Sennheiser PC360 SE gaming headset with his computer. His friends complain that when they speak, they can hear an echo of themselves that seems to be coming from his headset. The headset uses two 3.5 millimeter connectors, one for the headphone and one for the mic. It also comes with an adapter to combine them into a single 3.5 millimeter connector. Would getting an external USB adapter fix this issue? If so, will any external USB sound card do, or would it be worth in any way to spend upwards of $100? So this is some sort of crosstalk issue, right? Is that
I mean, I
going
think
on here,
his mic is picking up the sound from his cans.
Well, I mean, that's the only. So there's two ways this can be happening. It can be happening someplace in the computer in the wire
Right.
as it's coming across, or you've got your headphones turned up so loud that it's bleeding out and going. Or if are they these aren't open.
They
back.
are open back.
They're open back, then that's how it's happening.
Yeah, there's sound getting out of those cans and back into the microphone with just enough delay that the people on the other end are picking it up. I don't think a USB connector is going to solve this issue. I don't think that has anything to do with this. What can be done outside of changing
new headphones?
I mean, I hate that solution because that's a lot more expensive. But
I don't know how else you're going to fix it. I mean, I guess you could. This sounds stupid. You could get something like those earmuffs and put those over the headphones,
right?
So that it's sort of deadening the sound as it comes
wear
out.
in-ear monitors inside of the headphones and don't actually use the headphone part of the PC360s. It's same solution. We're getting new headphones at that point.
Still new headphones.
I mean, I think that's what's going on. I mean, I've had that same, and we even had that a little bit with those V-Motos that we used to use that were sealed. Every once in a while, you could pick up just a little, if somebody was loud enough, you could pick up just a little bit of your own voice coming back from their headset. It just
Why would they make an open back?
Because it's Sennheiser. They love their open back headphones. They do sound good.
For gaming
and for chat.
The microphone?
Yeah, not good for chat. I mean, it's the same thing that happens when somebody is just using their, their laptop setup, right? Their built-in webcam and built-in mic. Sometimes you get that horrible echo that comes back. It plays out of their speakers or their headphones, and the little laptop mic picks it up, and you get that delayed feedback loop going on. Christian, I don't have a solution that's better than getting headphones that keep all their sound inside.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess...
And then don't turn it up too loud.
I guess you could get a different microphone, a really directional microphone, and replace the mic instead of replacing the headphones. If you really like the headphones, just don't use the built-in attached mic and use a separate mic. That's much more directional.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Either way, we're saying replace part of this.
You got to replace part of this.
And not just converting it to USB. I really don't think that's going to solve this issue.
No. So Christian got himself a 65-inch C8 OLED, and when his neighbor saw it, he said he's 95% sure he wants to upgrade his own TV now. Christian's neighbor has a 55-inch TCL P605. He's a heavy gamer, and his kids leave the TV on all the time, so Christian isn't sure an OLED is the right choice. Plus, he would really like to get the 65-inch TV this time for under $2,000. He's quite happy with the TCL's gaming performance, but he says that for movies, especially HDR, the halos and light bleed around small, bright objects is horrible. And he can't stand it anymore, especially after seeing Christian's OLED. So what should Christian tell his neighbor to get? Do 65-inch OLEDs go for under $2,000 these days? And if so, what? Given the way his neighbor uses his TV, is it worth the risk? If he's sticking with LCD because of the heavy gaming and kids, what offers the best picture quality with the best least blooming for under $2,000 in the 65-inch size? So the real question here is, how much control do you have over how much control does your friend have over his children? Because if I know that, and this is as a father, I can tell you I have about 2% control over what my kids do around this house. No matter how much I yell, how much I bribe, how much I control, no matter how much I, praise or mock or whatever, no matter what strategies you use, there are certain things my children will not do until they leave my house and realize that I was not just nagging them, that they really needed to do these things. So, I've got a son who's got an Eagle Scout project that it feels like I'm in a Western and that horse won't move, and I'm whipping the crap out of it trying to get it to go. I'm like, you are the one who wants to do this thing.
Right.
You want to do this. It is important to you. You have expressed that, and yet you won't do a thing about it unless I yell at you for 3 or 4 days, and then you finally get the thing done. So to think that he's going to be able to just tell his kids, don't leave the TV on, is probably not going to work. It also won't work with the wife for sure, but if that's also part of his problem. But I would highly recommend you not get an OLED if you're in a situation where people are leaving the TV on.
I know.
Constantly.
I mean, because they are so nice, and if you do end up with any kind of harsh image retention or burn, and man, is that heartbreaking and terrifying, and it's probably not worth it. You can get 65-inch OLEDs for under $2,000 these days. If you shop around, not say Best Buy directly or Amazon directly, but one of their resellers or through eBay. You can definitely, even the current ones, the C9 and definitely the B9, which is a little bit less expensive to begin with, can be found for under $2,000. If you go back a model year to like your C8 or the B8 from last year, those can definitely be found for, not way under $2,000. We're talking maybe $1,800 or $1,900, but under $2,000. But I have to agree with Tom and with you, Christian. I don't think that an OLED is really, for the use case, for the picture quality that your neighbor has expressed wanting, there is no LCD that completely matches an OLED. Like completely matches.
Well, it can't. It can't. Because there's always a backlight there's always a number of backlights. It's not a light per pixel. There's a backlight for some number of pixels. And even if it has, 100, 200, individual backlights, that's not pixel per pixel. There's
not when
there's some blooming.
Not when there's 8 million pixels. Nope, it doesn't equal that. But what are the best options? Because there are some that are better than others. So right around the $2,000 mark, 65-inch size, sticking with an LCD. I think there's two. Potentially three, but I don't think the price of the third one actually fits below $2,000. So I think there's two that I could point you to that are at least worth checking out. And that would be Vizio's current flagship, which is their P Quantum X. All right, not just P Quantum, P Quantum X now.
Because the X makes it better.
It does, but that thing is getting up to, I think it's 450-ish local dimming zones. I mean, it's the most they've ever had. Gets super duper bright if you want it to, but actually, if you want to reduce haloing, sometimes turning down the maximum light helps a little bit, but it has their best local dimming algorithm to date, and for gaming purposes, negligible latency. I mean, really low latency, so be an excellent gaming display, and it does have Dolby Vision. So if your neighbor really wants Dolby Vision, that is there. The other option would be Samsung. I would probably actually lean towards the Samsung a bit, even though it has one thing that I would quibble with as more of a movie diehard and director's intent person that I am. But the Q80 series is the one that would fit this budget. And now, of course, the Q90 series has even more local dimming zones, but it goes above this budget. It starts getting you $2,500, $2,600 for the 65-incher. The Q80, though, is really, really good. And what Samsung has done is it's not just about how many zones of local dimming you have. It's also about the algorithms that are applied. And what they've chosen to do in Samsung's case is to try and limit the haloing as much as they possibly can. Now, what happens as a result of that is sometimes, like if you're looking at a star field in particular, some of those stars are dimmer or outright invisible versus on an OLED or on an LCD that isn't doing any kind of local dimming. Because instead of making the stars nice and bright but then having a halo, they're like, well, we reduce that brightness, that gets rid of the halo, but now the star is a bit dimmer, or sometimes if it was already a little bit dim, outright invisible. So you lose some of that detail a little bit. Also, the thing that I don't really like about Samsung TVs is they give you no way of perfectly tracking the HDR EOTF, the electro-optical transfer function. They always make HDR look a little bit brighter than it really should be. Now, most people actually like that, which is precisely why Samsung is doing it. But I just don't like that they give you no option for getting true accuracy. Have two different picture modes, one's that perfectly accurate and one that is the default that looks a little bit brighter. Who's that hurting? But regardless, I think the Q80 will probably satisfy more. Doesn't have Dolby Vision because it's Samsung, so it has HDR10 Plus instead. But given that what he really hates is the haloing, the Samsung Q80 is going to be the best solution here for the price and size.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, I would like to be able to suggest you getting an OLED, but
Yeah,
I just can't.
yeah.
I mean, I've seen burn-in on OLEDs before,
Yep.
and it's been display models at TV at like Target. So clearly these were abused TVs, but it can get pretty dramatic.
Yep. And once it's there,
really,
it's there, and you're never going to be able to
there.
unsee it. So, yeah.
Ted on Twitter. Ted gave our suggestion to use a Y splitter and run his dual subwoofers in mono ago, and it sounded better, less wobbly or something. I don't know what that means.
It's a subjective term, but he liked it, so okay.
All right, whatever. So he would like to understand what's going on in more detail. He's using a Denon X4500H, which offers Odyssey, with the sub EQ HT. That mentions summing together the two subs outputs before EQ is applied. So how is that different from running both subs off of one subwoofer output via Y splitter? Because it always chooses. There's no way to choose. Give us just both subs the same thing. They always do something a little bit different for each sub, which is why either front, back, left, right. Is that those are options?
Oh no,
front,
that's
back?
Yamaha. But in Odyssey sub EQ HT, what it does first it level matches the two subs. Now we're in favor of that, so it automatically level matches your two subwoofers independently.
But then it changes the distances.
But then it changes the distances. And what it attempts to do is time align subwoofer 1 with your speakers and time align subwoofer 2 with your speakers. So it is time aligning the two subs independent of one another, trying to time align all of the speakers and subwoofers together. Now that will then result in some kind of wave pattern in your room that isn't necessarily uniformity from seat to seat anymore. Depending on what kind of... Possibly.
Could.
We're not certain, but it could be, and there's nothing you can really do about it during the automatic part of the process. And
put it to you this way, basically when the mathematical models that we use to predict how a sub is going to act in a rectangular room is based off of both the subs playing the exact same thing at the exact same time.
And then...
So by altering the distances between the subs and your main seat, you are... Now one sub is playing slightly before or slightly after the other sub. Therefore, that mathematical model no longer works or applies.
And then in the scenario where we've talked about you don't have a rectangular room or you're not able to place your subs directly across the room from one another where that mathematical model would work, with them both being set to the same distance and playing in mono, we talk about adjusting the phase manually of one of the subs and essentially doing trial and error to get to where it sounds uniform and then applying the EQ. But the problem is with sub EQ HT, setting the distance automatically and then applying the EQ automatically, and you having no opportunity to change the phase/distance setting manually before it does all of that, the EQ that results is the EQ that it thinks is best after having time aligned the two subs, and there's no way for you to go back in there. Like, even if you went back in and manually set the distances to the same distances now, the EQ was applied to the old setting, and you can't get it. Just, there's no way to fight that because it does the whole thing in one shot automatically. So that's why we say if you just use the one subwoofer output, use a Y splitter to feed the exact same signal to both subs, you are manually adjusting the phase, manually level matching them, and then applying one EQ to what you have set manually, and that works out. So
in my situation, my subs are just about equal distance from my seat. Physically. So I ran it the way, just straight Odyssey. It set the distance differences like by a difference of like 0.1 or 0.2, whatever the finest one was. So I then went back and got a Y splitter and did it the way we're talking about here. Differences being negligible in this room. I couldn't really hear a difference.
And in my case, my two subs are equidistant physically, and it measured them equidistant, so it set them both to the same distance setting anyway, so it worked. But if it's given you two different distances, with an obviously appreciable difference, then that's the issue of doing it the automatic way. So covered all of that in my 12-step guide to setting up dual subwoofers, which I forwarded to Ted, and he read through it, and that led to another question.
So using the two subwoofer outputs on this X4500H makes it very easy to level match this dual subwoofer, since the Odyssey auto setup has him adjust the volume knobs using an all-screen meter reading before it begins the full setup procedure. But if he's going to follow Rob's 12-step guide, should he not do that? Should he only ever use one subwoofer output on his X4500H? And the answer is yes, but you could still use that on-screen meter.
You could do that part first and then just not run the rest of the auto setup, because if what it's getting you to do is set the volume knobs on the subwoofers themselves, well, you can use that part of it because that's not going to change. Now the volume knobs are set correctly. So
turn one sub on and one sub off, adjust it until it's right, and that's 75. Where it's supposed to be, and then turn that sub off, turn the other sub on.
That is the other way to do it. Yep.
And then adjust it that way, and then turn them both on. And if they're close enough to it'll say it's still there. Make it so it's just barely in the green or whatever.
That's right.
Or barely out of the green, because they're going to boost each other. You can use that as I wouldn't say poor man's, because receivers are really expensive, but as a poor man's SPL meter.
Right.
Which is what I used.
So either way, actually Tom's solution is even easier, because then you're not worrying about actually changing any settings in the receiver. You're still telling the receiver, I have one subwoofer. I know physically you have two, but you're telling your receiver, I have only one subwoofer. You're using the one subwoofer output with a Y splitter to physically connect both of your subs, and then it's just a matter of you power off one of the subs at a time during this. Let's get the level of the subwoofer set correctly, the volume dial of the subwoofer itself. Turn one off, set one of them, then turn that one on, turn the other one off, set that one, and now you're done. Yeah.
So yes, why did Odyssey want to independently time align each subwoofer anyway? Because they, there's so many
theories,
things that could be going in. Theories. We don't know. We don't know why they did this exactly, but certain customers are going to expect that. A lot of customers want to run their subs in stereo instead of mono. They don't really give us an option for mono, because I think that I don't even know why they wouldn't give us. We want it, but I think we're like the minority. I think we're the lone voice crying out in the wilderness about this thing.
Actually, Gene from Audioholics encouraged them to do it the way that they do it. So there's a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, so
honestly, if you didn't have walls, it would work. So the problem is those pesky darn walls that you have in that room of yours. Take everything out to an outdoor field and also put everything 60 feet up in the air, and make sure there's nothing above you except open sky. You do that, this will work just fine. But no, having those pesky walls. So yeah, a little bit of the theory wasn't quite right at the time. There's also the issue of, so this gets really close. It gets really close to exactly what we're trying to do. And if you go all the way over to something like JBL's Arcos system, where it brute strength does the trial and error for you and just keeps playing sweeps and keeps independently adjusting up to, I think they can do up to 16 subwoofers in that system, but it just keeps independently adjusting them until it finds, through raw trial and error, the most uniform response it can, and then it sends a mono signal which it EQs as if you had one subwoofer that happens to have multiple parts. That is the ideal solution. It does exist, but of course the processing power to do all of that is a lot more than what's built into a consumer AV receiver.
It's so hard too, because from the manufacturer side, from Odyssey side, they had to make a certain number of decisions, and some of those decisions, I believe, are made on expectations of what consumers will understand.
Right. I agree.
And in a having an option for mono at the same signal out of both, or treating both as one. They were getting absolutely hammered on AV websites because they were having.
Why aren't these two subs independent? Yeah.
Well, dual subwoofer outputs were often just Y splitters that were internal to the AV receiver. Yeah. So once they got a bunch of negative feedback about that, of course, the next thing they wanted was, we got to be able to control these things independently. but they no longer gave us the option of doing them as one. And that's where we sort of
It's so close. It's tantalizingly close to being just right, but yeah.
I mean, but think of it. I mean, look at the Xbox One. How long has it been since they've gotten this audio right? And they've got all the processing power they need. And if you think that changing Odyssey, and then upgrading it, and then for new receivers or whatever is a small matter. I mean, it's the perception of, okay, you changed something, you added a feature here. Does that make it better than it was before? And do you really want to make that change until you've got enough stuff to say that makes it make sense? Because remember, Axiom Audio came out with their V2, V3, V4 versions, and they just kept saying they sound exactly the same as the other ones, but this is just a different version. Like, so why do you have a different version if they sound the same? Well, because we're using different parts. But they sound the same? Yeah, so they sound the same. And it just caused confusion, and people were irritated with them. But plus, they cost 5 times as much. But whatever, it's neither here nor there. All right, Legacy Audio. This is a new topic. Also with Ted, Legacy Audio released their Class D Ice Edge based
IV7. Yeah.
Class D Ice Edge based IV7 amplifier, which they claim is the most powerful 7 or 8 channel amplifier for home consumers with a rating of 600 watts into 8 ohms. Ice amps were created by Bang & Olufsen, and they basically allow you to buy the modules and then modify them however you want. So for a while, Ice amps were all the rage, and then people realized that just because they were a rage doesn't make them awesome.
Although these are like the newest version, they've sorted out almost all of the impedance wobbles that happen if you have speakers that wildly fluctuate in impedance. They've sorted out a lot of that, although took a lot of filtering to do it, and hence we end up at a price point like this.
Yeah. So the 600 watts into 8 ohms, all channels driven with only 0.005% total harmonic distortion, or THD. That's only at 1 kilohertz, though, not full range. Any single channel can deliver up to 1,000 watts of peak output, and it claims 127 dB signal-to-noise ratio, $8,000 for the 7-channel version, or 9,000 for the 8-channel version, which doesn't make sense exactly, but whatever. And to reach that rate of power, you need either a 230-volt 20-amp circuit or 2 120-volt 20-amp circuits. Yep. So does that mean you have to plug it into 2 completely different outlets that are on 2 completely
breakers? Separate breakers? Yeah, we're not talking about the 2 outlets that are ultimately connected to one breaker. No, if it's 120 volts, 20 amps, 2 completely different breakers to power one amplifier, or you get a 230/240 volt 20 amp circuit. So that's not quite what would drive your clothes dryer, because that's 30 amp. But yeah.
Well, that's close.
A big old plug. You got to tell them ahead of time, because they got to put the right kind of plug into this thing. Let them know before you order.
So Ted would like to know what having that many watts is all about. Is it a matter of having lower distortion at crazy high output levels? For example, you saw a Sony boombox once. Boombox, yeah, this is clearly the same thing. Boombox once that claimed it was 1,200 watts, but that was at 60% total harmonic distortion.
Yup. More distortion than signal.
That's a lot of... So if these legacy amps deliver 600 watts per channel at only 0.005 or 5... That's not thousands, it's 10,000s, right? 5, 10, whatever. That's a lot cleaner, right? And what about an amp rated at the same low distortion, but only at, say, 200 watts? Could it actually deliver 600 watts too, but at a much higher distortion? Well, yeah, that's the whole point.
Well, I mean, not always, because there is such a thing as the output transistors becoming completely saturated and not being able to put through any more current than what they're putting through. So they might not
There's
be
a
able.
limit.
There is a limit to just what the output transistors are able to send through them current-wise. But so if it's able to continuously deliver 200 watts, it almost certainly could deliver 600 watts for a short amount of time. There's hardly anything that would be designed to continuously deliver 200 watts that couldn't burst up to 600 watts for a microsecond, something like that. But the distortion might be at a higher percentage than the amplifier like this that can deliver 600 watts continuously.
Right. Yeah. So why do we have these type of amps? Well, so in the reality is that there are some speakers that have very low impedance that dip very, very low and will require a draw of a huge amount of power for a very short period of time. Sometimes,
Coincidentally, some of Legacy Audio's own gigantic tower designs fit that category.
so, a lot of times when you see a speaker manufacturer come out with an amp, it's because they're solving a problem that they created. They're like, this is our our electrostatic speaker from whichever they almost all have an amp that you can buy with it. And that idea is that we know that our speakers are hard to drive. Instead of trying to fix that, or, because we can't fix it in order to do all the other stuff we wanted to do, here's an amp that will be able to drive it and without breaking.
In fact, Legacy Audio has some gigantic tower speakers that have built-in amplifiers for their woofer or subwoofer sections that are these. These are what they are, and now they put a bunch of them into one box and said, drive any speakers you want with the amplifiers we designed. Yep.
And so there's that goes on, but there's also this idea that there's people out there who will buy a 500-watt monoblock amplifier that's twice the size of a receiver and it weighs 200 pounds, so they could put it right next to their, like within 2 inches of their speaker, because it looks nice. And they love the idea of having all this headroom to drive your tweeter. And it's like owning a Ferrari and driving it in the residential neighborhood. Yes, it technically has a bunch of power, but you're never going to do anything with it.
But I did want to mention, like over at ATI, they also have Class D amplifiers. They've been offering them for a little while now. Now they use the N-Core, the Hypex N-Core Class D amplifier modules. But so here's an example where they also have a 7 or an 8 channel model, but at 200 watts continuous, not 600 watts continuous, all channels driven, but the prices are down at $4,200 or $4,600 respectively. Right. So about half the price of these Legacy Audio ones. Then they also have ones where what they basically did was take 2 modules and use 2 modules to drive 1 channel. So you can get, you can get a 3-channel or a 4-channel version of that. Now you're talking $4,600 for only 4 channels, but that can deliver not just 500 watts continuously into 8 ohms, but 900 watts continuously into 4 ohms. So Legacy Audio is claiming theirs is the most powerful 7 or 8 channel in one chassis, amplifier for consumer market, and that holds true because ATI's is more powerful, but only 4 channels in one chassis. Yes.
Right. All right, Chad. Chad's living room presents some acoustical challenges, as do all of them. It's an irregular shape and open at the back to his kitchen. On the right side are floor-to-ceiling windows, and on the left side is a door to his office, which is usually left open because when he measured his bass response with Room EQ Wizard, it was actually much better with his office door open. It's like a bass trap. Yep. And there's an open hallway entrance on the left side as well. The floor of the living room is all concrete. He's put down some area rugs, and his couch is cloth and fairly plush. His office is carpeted and has lots of bookcases. And he has a half-height bookcase behind his couch that sort of visually separates the living room from the kitchen. He's installed a couple of bass traps in his front 2 front corners, but that's it so far as panels. So it's still a pretty live room in this, or still pretty live in this room. He'd like to add some more treatments. So right wall is glass, like all the way across, all the way across. Left is an opening kind of behind the couch, and to the left of the couch is the open door that goes to his office, and behind him is not directly behind the couch, but some space behind that, where he put his, looks like his surround backs.
Yep. Why not use that bookcase?
Is the bookshelf. Yeah, it's the bookshelf. So he wrote to GIC, and they said in his case they would recommend simply adding as much absorption as he can without worrying much about exact placement. I agree.
I completely agree. They are correct. Yep.
So he's drawn up these plans to add panels on his front wall, which would be quite easy and straightforward. Then he's planned on for a single freestanding panel in front of his windows, and lastly, he's planned on 3 other panels on only the side wall spaces he has available. Does it matter that all of these side wall panels are asymmetrical? Should he opt for thicker 244, which is 2 feet by 4 feet by 4 inches
Right.
thick panels everywhere, even if there won't be a matching panel on the opposite side. What's our take on the best way to treat this room? As thick and as much as possible.
Yup.
I don't really care where. In this case, you're so restricted that you can't say, oh, well, I'm not going to put one here because there's not one across the room from it. Who gives a crap? Put it where you can.
Yeah.
Don't, at this point, we're not going to get
This is
picky.
a case of reducing overall echoes and reverberation time of this space as a whole, as opposed to spot treating actual reflections. Like, we're not really concerned with spot treating first reflections in your case. We just want to knock the echo and reverberation time down in this space as a whole. I mean, like, you go into a gymnasium and they just have baffles on the ceiling, right? Absorption material just hanging down from the ceiling. That has nothing to do with first reflections. It's just about trying to reduce some of the overall echo, and you're in a not completely dissimilar situation in your case. The thicker the panels are, the greater the range of frequencies they will address. There's essentially no reason outside of just physicality and looks. If you're like, I don't have the physical depth to put a thick panel here, fine. Put what you can. But as thick as you can, as many as you can. That's what you do. If you could have 2 freestanding panels across that glass instead of only one, that would be a benefit. Having just one over there, again, I mean, it's purely about knocking down some echoes, but given that that is a true reflection surface, if you could have a couple of freestanding panels over there, that'd be nice.
Yeah. Clara, she asks, in our systems, do we apply EQ above the modal range, i.e. above the transition frequency of our rooms? So I'm going to continue reading, then we'll answer. There are conflicting opinions about how high up the frequency range that EQ should be applied. And with the Odyssey Editor app, she has the option to limit the range of frequencies where EQ is applied. So what's our take? Should she limit Odyssey's EQ to just the modal range or have it apply EQ full range? I will tell you, Clara, I am a very lazy person. And I am not going to sit here and futz with my Odyssey Editor app any more than I absolutely have to in order to get it to sound good. I actually slightly changed the orientation of my my overhead speakers, the top middles. They were sort of to the side to make them as wide as possible, and I switched because they're on swivels. So I swiveled them so that they were slightly more to the back. So they were a little bit more in line with my head. They were a little bit, the tiny bit in front of me, and I wanted them to be a little bit to the side there. And I didn't rerun Odyssey because I couldn't be bothered.
And I use a Marantz receiver that is old enough that it doesn't have the Odyssey Editor app available to it. So theoretically, I could track down someone with an Odyssey Pro kit and do manual EQ that way, but I don't have access to the nicely affordable and easy Editor app, so I just let it do its whole thing. Would I? Well, in an ideal world where I had plenty of time and the money and the resources to do it, yes, I might limit it. Now, I don't necessarily agree with only EQing up to a maximum of being the transition frequency of the room. I think it makes sense to still EQ a bit higher than that. Where I don't think it makes sense to EQ is in the range that is truly directional, which, I mean, in the case of a 1-inch dome tweeter would basically be about 8 kilohertz upwards. I don't think it makes any sense to try and equalize that, because that is automatically going to be different from seat to seat, just because if you're using a 1-inch tweeter above 8 kilohertz, it's going to be directional just from the diameter of the driver itself. You can't get away from it. So I don't know how much EQ Odyssey genuinely applies above, say, 8 kilohertz. It's tough to tell because we're not very good at hearing that high anyway. You know, like if I do a hearing test, I can still hear about 15, 16 kilohertz. I just from age-related hearing loss, I don't hear much above 16 kilohertz anymore, which is typical for my age. But you know, we're talking an octave below that. So if a test tone is playing, yeah, I can hear it. But when it's mixed in with all the other sounds, how much am I really hearing? 10, 12, 14 kilohertz. Like it's very little. But I think it makes sense to still EQ up into the mid range. I might reduce what it does in the treble.
Yeah, I think that what Rob just said is very, applicable. It's like, why there's only so much we can actually tell the difference between, and sitting here and getting crazy about it doesn't necessarily make it sound any better.
Yeah.
Most of the differences that we hear are between our ears and not actually outside of our head. We buy silver-plated copper cables because we think they make it sound better. They don't actually make it sound better or any different whatsoever. We worry about whether or not we should EQ different parts of the frequency range. Where it's making the most difference, we're certainly not going to touch. And it is making a difference that we can hear. And then the other stuff it might be fiddling with above or below that, you're like, well, I can't hear it anyway. So
I mean, honestly, even
whatever.
when I play sweeps, full frequency range sweeps, I mean, I can't honestly tell you that once it gets above around maybe 4 or 5 kilohertz that I'm even capable of noticing if it's starting to wiggle in the amplitude of the frequencies up there. Like, it's going whoop, and like once it gets above that high vocal range, I'm like, I can't even tell. You could change the EQ, and unless it was like an enormous change, a 20 decibel change or something, I bet I wouldn't even notice.
Right. Andrew is shopping for a new TV at least 75 inches, and he's in Canada. He's got a light-controlled room, so he's not worried about having crazy high light output or the best ever anti-glare filter. Which is good. It's something I almost never worry about. And it's pretty much just Andrew and his wife watching the TV directly from the front, so super wide viewing angles are not a priority. He isn't a competitive gamer, so he is not worried about input lag or variable refresh rate, and he does watch a lot of sports, so he wants a clean-looking motion and as little dirty screen effect as possible. Dirty screen effect. What is
so
that?
that is the slight uniformity not being perfect, especially in like a full white screen or a light gray screen. And if things are moving, you get, it looks like your screen has smudges on it, but it's actually just slightly non-uniform illumination of the panel that goes on.
So he went for an entry-level 4K TV with his last 2 purchases, and while they were good value, he feels like he's ready to drop some big bucks on a truly excellent TV now. No more compromises. So now's the wrinkle. He's able to get discounts on Samsung TVs, but of course he's also considered OLED. Since he wants at least 75 inches, he's looking at the 77-inch OLED models, and they all seem to be going for $8,000 Canadian right now. So you get that or an amplifier from Legacy Audio.
No, that's $8,000 for that amplifier.
Oh, all right. Canadian, that's like $1,200 or something like that. With this discount, even a flagship 4K Samsung QLED at the 82-inch size would be cheaper. And more than that, Samsung's 8K QLED Q900R models would be less expensive with this discount. So is Dolby Vision worth worrying about at all? Samsung does not support it. Well, I mean, I think we should be more worried about that picture quality that you seem to be really worried that the sports movement and stuff like that, and truly good backlighting where not backlighting, but contrast levels where that motion, that dirty screen that you're talking about isn't going to happen. And if you want to not happen, you have to go with OLED. I mean, then it does not happen.
I mean, OLED is the best solution for that. Although at the 77-inch size, the chances of seeing any slight uniformity in the screen is higher. So even OLEDs aren't completely free from any dirty screen effect. You can't get away from it entirely, but it is known that the budget 4K models, we're talking your TCLs or your like Vizio M series or a Hisense or something like that. They're really high value. It's amazing the features and the performance that they're actually giving you for the type of prices that they're charging, but they are using less expensive panels to begin with versus the flagship Sonys or the flagship Samsungs. The uniformity isn't quite as good, and that just is a fact. Every reviewer and measurement has shown that to be the case, and it's not shocking when you look at the price differences. So this question specifically, Dolby Vision, if your television handles HDR10 nicely, so either it just has the sheer brightness that it doesn't have to tone map, or it has really good dynamic tone mapping, frame by frame analysis, dynamic tone mapping. I haven't seen the need for Dolby Vision, really. I mean, if you put them side by side, the two versions, sometimes there are little differences, and the Dolby Vision version will tend to retain all the detail a little bit better. But I don't think it's worth worrying about to that extent. And given that the flagship Samsungs can hit like 2,000 nits, you pretty much don't have to tone map the vast majority of content.
So I'm looking back at this question and I'm thinking to myself, what does Andrew really want us to say?
Well, there's that.
You know, because it seems to me that he really wants us to say buy an OLED and it's totally going to be worth it because of the things that he said he wasn't worried about. You know, the things that he's not worried about are things that Samsung, you know, either
Touts.
does and the other one doesn't, you know, the OLED doesn't, and or, you know, kind of suggests that, you know, this is a problem with OLED that he's not worried about, you know, crazy high light output and stuff
Well,
like
and I
that.
did want to point out that, interestingly, in Canada, we get a 77-inch version of the B9, which isn't available in the United States. In the United States, the B9 series is 55 inches and 65 inches. If you want a 77-inch OLED, you have to go to the C9 series in the States. But in Canada, for some reason, we get a 77-inch B9, which goes for $6,500. Still really expensive, but better than $8,000. And there is the option. I don't know how close you are to the border and what it might be, but like you can get 77-inch OLEDs in the States for about $4,000 US dollars now. Now, there's going to be some cost to either shipping or picking that thing up and bringing it across the border. So you end up probably closer to about $5,000 US dollars all in, which is kind of close to $6,500 Canadian. But then we have our tax on top of that, and the 5,000 US. I'm including all the border fees. So it's kind of close. You're probably looking somewhere in the 6,500, 7,000 Canadian dollar range if you go for a B9, which we have available to us. But with the discounts that he mentioned that he can get on Samsung TVs, they would definitely still be less expensive at the 75-inch size.
So I'm going to be, I'm going to sort of give you my overall answer to this question, which comes from my own personal biases and stuff like that. So let's just remember that, you know, if you really have a hard time making a decision about something, what I always do is if I'm like stuck on the fence, I'm like, I really want this. I also really want this, but for two different reasons, I can't figure out which I really want more of. I assign one heads, one tails, flip a coin, and see when it comes down if I'm disappointed or happy.
Yep.
Like that's the way I know whether or not this is a thing. So his next question is does it make sense to still consider a 77-inch OLED when an 82-inch QLED is a less expensive option for him? QLED is heads, OLED is tails, flip a coin.
I mean, if it's me, I'm going for that OLED. That's me.
Yeah. You see, for me, I would be going for the cheaper option. Sure. And I just, especially since I think the cheaper option is going to be thousands of dollars cheaper. It's very, very hard for me to output that kind of money myself without really good reasons. And I don't know that OLED has. I would have to see them side by side before I would say this is worth thousands more than this one.
Well, and it's because, you know, I'm getting nitpicky there because, like, we're talking about, say, the Q90 R series, right? Samsung's flagship. And, like, the nitpicky things to me there are, I don't like that it doesn't have a truly accurate HDR mode, right? Like I say, most people like what Samsung is doing by making HDR always look a little bit brighter than is technically correct. But I don't like that, and the LG OLED I can make exactly right to the HDR standard. So there's that one little thing. There is it's using a tremendous amount of local dimming and some pretty darn good algorithm processing on that QLED to not have any blooming, but the little teeny tiny little stars once in a while, they get too dim or they disappear. Never happens on the OLED. I mean, this is nitpicky stuff, but for me, it's enough to say I'm getting that 77-inch OLED if there's any way that I can. But of course, if you're like, but the Q90R I can get for $2,000 less, I'm like, yeah, that's a very compelling reason.
Yeah. So without telling us the price, which he hasn't done, it's my assumption is that we're talking thousands of dollars in difference. If we're talking hundreds of dollars in difference, I'm going OLED. That would be the case no matter what. Even if we're, you know, talking flagship Samsung versus, you know, not quite flagship, you know, and even, you know, smaller as
like if it were the Q80, right? The Q80 are one step down from the flagship.
Yeah, I would still be leaning towards OLED. But if we're talking thousands, it's going to be very, very hard for me to
But let's
do
say
that.
the thousands of dollars do make a difference, and for that reason, he's going to not get the OLED and he's going to get a QLED instead.
Yeah. So if he's comparing the 4K QLED versus the 8K QLED, is the 8K worth it? If it's an 8K QLED versus 4K OLED, with the 8K QLED still being cheaper because of discount, does that tip the scales in any way? I would not buy an 8K nothing.
We're on the, so technically Samsung's is, I would call it like maybe the 1.5 generation, because they had the very first 8K that they brought out, that was the Q900RA, and now it's the Q900RB series, but it's not really a true generation change.
The way that I would put an 8K in my house is if someone physically brought it here and left it. That is the way I would take an 8K in my house. I would not spend a cent on it.
They don't have, none of Samsung's 8K QLEDs have an HDMI 2.1 input. So there is no way to feed them 8K content. Now, they have the external one Connect box, and Samsung has said, well, we can replace just the Connect box. That was the whole idea of the external Connect box when we have an HDMI 2.1 solution ready. But okay, I mean, it's early. It's too early for 8K.
Too early
it's too early. 8K. And given, so here's the thing. For the price that you're looking at, you might be able to afford the 75-inch 8K for around the same price as the 82-inch 4K. We're talking QLED versus QLED. Go for the bigger 82-inch QLED if that's the scenario. No question.
This is an 8K that's 8K pretty much in name only. Yes, it can.
It has that many pixels. Yes,
it has that many pixels, and it will be displaying all those pixels that it upscaled from 4K to 8K for its native resolution. But you will never be able to buy an 8K Ultra HD, whatever they're going to end up calling it, 8K thing, and plug it in. There's no guarantee that their streaming services, if they ever get to 8K, will work. There's no cable box that you're going to be able to connect directly to this TV that will be able to send an 8K sports signal from the Olympics.
And actually, a lot of the reviewers have pointed out how if you're watching 1080p, which you're gonna be, there's a whole lot of content that's still 1080p, that 1080p looks sharper on the 4K than it does on the 8K because of all the upscaling that has to go on. Honestly, you get the 4K in that case.
I would. There is literally no way I would buy an 8K right now. No way. In fact, if someone dropped it off at the house, I'd probably.
And if it's,
I'm going to be honest with you.
If it's 8K QLED versus 4K OLED for right around the same price, I'm getting the OLED. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Rob W. Different Rob W. Not you.
Well, I'm Rob H. So of course it's different.
You're Rob H. That's what I meant.
W's different.
Why did I think your last name was W? I don't know. My coffee is worn off. Will Anchor's foray into the home theater projector market upend everything? They have a Kickstarter going on for their new Nebula Cosmos, which is 1080p, and Cosmos Max, which are 4K projectors with MSRPs of $700 and $1,700 respectively. But of course, being Kickstarter products with projected shipping dates of April 2020, you can pledge early and get them at discounted prices. The lowest early bird pledge levels have sold out, so $470 and $1,100 respectively, are the lowest offers at the time we're recording this. So what supposedly makes them so special? LED light sources instead of regular lamps, and apparently marketing to a crowd that has never looked into home theater projectors before. So their DLP, Rec 709 color, 900 and 1500 lumens max respectively. So 900 lumens for the 1080p and 1500 for the 4K. They make a big deal about saying they measure using ANSI lumens, unlike the competitors, which measures.
I mean, that one I put 3 question marks after, because I'm like,
what would be the other option?
I've never seen a projector
lumens?
not listed in ANSI lumens. I don't even know what they're talking about.
So they run Android, not Android TV, mind you, and they have 10-watt speakers built in with Dolby Digital decoding.
Dolby Digital Plus.
That's necessary.
They made a big deal.
Oh, plus
they said this is 360-degree sound because it's Dolby Digital Plus. I'm like, that is also a strange claim, but okay.
So they have autofocus and keystone correction, no lens shift or manual lens adjustment. For some reason, these are getting some pretty big hype. So what's our take? Well, you can tell Rob's take already.
By the way, I wrote this because I'm like, they apparently they have anyone who is buying this has never looked at BenQ.
Right.
I mean, we talk about the HT3550. That's a $1,500 DLP 4K projector that is like the first DLP projector at that type of price point I've ever seen that actually goes beyond Rec. 709 color. It actually has a color filter that you can put in place and hit pretty darn close to DCI P3 color. These don't pretend to do that. But BenQ has less expensive 4K DLP projectors that are limited to Rec. 709 and don't have the lens. Like the HT3550 has vertical lens shift and a pretty good zoom range for that price of projector, and especially for DLP. But if you took all those things away, so now it's just a fixed lens and the Rec. 709 color, and granted, using a lamp, not LED light source. So that is a distinguishing factor of these Anker brand projectors, is using the LED light source. But they go for like $850, $900. So this one being MSRP of $1,700, I mean, it's not unreasonable. The LED light source does cost more. There's nothing about the specs that is like horrible or anything like that. I would like a better lens system than what they've talked about. I mean, like auto keystone adjustment and autofocus. I'm like, no, I don't want either of those things. I would prefer not to have them.
Lumens.
They got ANSI lumens.
They've got the ANSI lumens, not the other kinds of lumens, which aren't as bright. Everybody knows this.
But
Rob.
I mean, there's nothing disruptive about these at all. These are right in line with the offerings from Optima and BenQ and Epson for that matter.
It's on Kickstarter. That's the only reason.
What it is, and it's getting talked up on Reddit or something like that. But like I say, it's clearly being marketed at people who've just never looked at home theater projectors before because they're.
Well, it's because they see the $1,700 price point and like I can get it for $1,100.
There's that.
And they've never. Like I don't even know where I would put it, but you know I got to get on this deal right now.
I mean,
so let's talk about it.
I'll grant you the LED light source. That is a distinguishing thing, but it's an LED light source that can only hit Rec. 709. So,
yeah. All right, let's do one more and then we're going to be done. Jason and his family have just moved into a new house. His wife has agreed that he can have a full dedicated theater in the basement. So up in the living room, he has agreed to ditching his bookshelf speakers on stands and open cable visible TV stand. If he gets the basement, she gets the nice looking, clean, no visible wires TV stand upstairs, which Jason thinks is pretty fair. So a new TV stand is being picked out, and everything needs to be contained within the stand. That has him thinking his best option is either a sound bar or a passive speaker bar. So what we would recommend. He's willing to spend good money. So should he consider a really high-end sound bar like the Sennheiser Amiibo?
Ambio.
Ambio? What is it? Like a little big-headed?
Oh, no, it is a honking sound bar. It's a tower speaker turned on its side. It's enormous.
Or should he get a regular AV receiver and use it to power a passive speaker bar along with, say, SVS SB2000? And don't worry too much about how things look in the photos. That was a hasty setup so his kid could watch Paw Patrol, because that's
that is priority.
When you have a kid, that is a priority one. Like, oh my God, you're using a telesitter?
Like, they just moved in.
Never had a child. Shut up. I'm trying to unpack the kitchen. That kid could smoke crack in the bathroom for all I care. We need some dishes to eat on. Priority, sir.
Yep.
He has yet to hang his GIC art panels, which are desperately needed in this new house, as this new house sounds like an echo chamber to him right now. So what do we suggest? You know what I suggest? I think, what's this? Yamaha makes one, is would they sound bass?
Oh, right. The things that
the
sit
platforms?
Right underneath your TV.
Yeah, one of the things that it basically looks like a box that's underneath your TV and your TV sits on top of it. So I'm looking at his TV. It looks like he's got one of the ones that has it could be on a mount.
That looks like really a 3-in-1 stand where it's like it's using the wall mount but attaching to a stock that stands up behind his. But they're getting a new stand, so the new stand doesn't necessarily have the wall mount attachment. I'm thinking this is going to be like a nice cabinet type looking thing where you can hide everything inside. Yeah, I would assume.
So that's why I like these things. These things are basically. And I know you're going to be like, it's the subwoofer. They have enough bass that you generally don't need to have in a situation like this. It's already corner loaded.
Yeah.
It's everything else. And basically these things are just a big platform that have a bunch of speakers up front and then ports in the back, usually, not
Well, I mean,
always, but ports
like
in the back.
the Sennheiser Ambio is almost that, except it isn't actually deep enough to act as a stand for your TV to stand on top of.
Yeah.
But it's like, what is that? I think it's over 6 inches top to bottom, because it's 4.5-inch drivers
That's
in there.
big.
And like, they're like, yeah, you don't really need a subwoofer with that one in terms of sheer bass extension. That's kind of true. But as we always talk about, placement is what really matters. But I mean, if you were just going for one massive thing that does sound good and doesn't necessarily need a subwoofer, then that Sennheiser Ambio isn't completely out of the picture. However, I can find almost no justification for recommending that thing, because
it's very big.
It's enormous, and it actually kind of needs to be at ear level to do its Ambio thing. So you'd either be using its Ambio processing, or your TV would have to be way up high. It's super compromising that way. So Tom's suggestion of a sound base, as far as ease of setup and placement and aesthetics, makes a lot of sense. My recommendation to you was going to be Klipsch's passive, or not Klipsch, well, possibly Klipsch's, but Kef's passive speaker bar. There is a Klipsch passive speaker bar that could also work here too, but I like Kef's HTF 8003. It's a nice slim looking speaker bar that has 3 actual speakers built into one, continuous bar looking thing. Sorry, I thought I had a picture of it, but I didn't. And yeah, I like that, along with, you don't need a crazy AV receiver, because it's just going to be those 3 speakers. And then, I mean, I like an SB2000 in here. And that total price.
Yeah, and that's fine too. I mean, you're going to, I'm trying to find this.
Yeah, so Klipsch's passive speaker bar is the RP440D, so that's part of their Reference Premier series. Again, it's 3 speakers built into one long enclosure. So the Klipsch goes for $800. The Kef HTF 8003 goes for $950. So both of those, like, if you were like the $2,500 for the Sennheiser Ambio is acceptable, then if you get those along with a reasonable AV receiver that's going to be in the $450, $500 range max, and a nice subwoofer, you're going to be under $2,000 for a system that I think makes more sense than that Sennheiser Ambio. Yeah, that's kind of the way I'd be going at it. I don't know how many of those sound bases are out there anymore.
The Yamaha's got a SRT 1500, which is $600. It says it's discontinued.
Yes.
But that's the one. That's the one
you were thinking of. Yeah.
But that's the one I was thinking of. So it's got dual, 10 speaker drivers in the front, because they have that sort of digital sound projection thing. A lot, and you can control it with your phone. So, and it's Bluetooth to Bluetooth headphones or speakers, 4K Ultra HD pass through, and HDCP 2.2. So it's got sort of all the things that you need. I can't see the back of it. Wait, maybe I can. I want to see if it's got
how many HDMI inputs it's got.
Yeah, well,
although you're
everything.
Probably just going to plug everything into the TV and use ARC to go back to the sound system if you're going with a sound-based
I'm
solution.
just looking for an output for like a subwoofer, but if you wanted to add that to it.
Yeah.
Let me see specs
I mean, yeah, to me, the speaker bar solution, I mean, obviously, Jason is not a person who's opposed to hooking up an AV system. We can see with the system that he's already got that he's used to that. So, hooking up a speaker bar to a traditional, I mean, you could continue to use the AV receiver you already have. There's no reason that can't drive a speaker bar. So there's no even need to replace your AV receiver.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you can even sell it that way. Hey, honey, I get to continue using what we already own. I'm just, replacing the speakers so that they look a lot nicer the way you want them to.
Yeah, if you could find this, it would basically be like a receiver, a speaker bar in one, and it has a subwoofer output, and you could add add the SB2000 if you so chose. So SRT 1500, I'm sure it's out there someplace.
But neither of us is really going sound bar. Even the high end ones.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I like to recommend Yamaha's DSP projector sound protectors. You're going to give me back a 2000 again. Yeah. But again, you won't need a receiver for that either. You just go straight from your sources
but looking at the room that he's got, I don't know that a sound projector is going to be able to do its actual actual bouncing of sound
It would,
thing.
yeah, you wouldn't do that. You would do the phase.
Yeah.
You would probably change it to the phase.
And those are huge too. I mean, the good ones,
they are
they're
very
enormous.
large. Yeah. I've had those in a corner and have had them like one's firing out a freaking opening and the other one's hitting the window and the other side's hitting the window and there's openings everywhere. So, and I ended up, it worked okay. It worked pretty good. And I think I ended up switching it to the phase thing, and it worked okay if you want to get sort of this semi-surround sort of thing. But, there's no reason to go crazy in here. That's my thought. Just get something that makes a lot of sound up front, and if you want to add some bass, get a subwoofer, set it right next to it so that no wires are shown, and you're good to go.
If you're worried about lots of sound with very little power, that Klipsch passive sound bar will absolutely do it for you. Speaker bar.
Yeah, for sure.
Alrighty, so on our list we have Luke K, Aiden C, and Infinite Gary. And I did get a bunch of questions that came in on Monday, so all of those will be on the list for next week.
All right, I want to thank our listeners of the week. I want to thank Kevin and Chad for going to www.avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. And we want to thank our 89 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yeah, Kevin and Chad, thank you very much for those one-time donations via PayPal, avrant.com if you want to come and do a one-time donation over on the right-hand side, and then patreon.com/AVRant Podcast if you'd like to sign up as an automatic monthly donation. And thanks to our 89 patrons over there.
And lastly, I want to thank Vincent for hooking me up with an Amazon gift card.
For sure.
Which I immediately used to buy a golfer's elbow brace.
All right. Well, Vincent, your Amazon gift card went to a good purpose. Thank you for supporting
I don't
us.
golf. I just have pain in my elbow, and I don't even know if that's what it is. But, I've got one of about 5 symptoms for golfer's elbow, so clearly it's either that or throat cancer, according to the internet.
Yes.
So I can't decide.
Or
which.
lupus. Could be lupus.
Could be lupus. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Skeleton Rob H. Now, have a happy Halloween. Go out and listen to something.